Hello and welcome back to my Cisco iOS demonstration videos. In our last video we touched on how to configure a network for a single VLAN environment. In this video we will be working on configuring a network for multiple VLANs. We also demonstrated how to set up the basic configurations of routers and switches. These configurations have been applied to all routers and switches as part of our network. Today we'll be focusing on configuring multiple VLANs in our network. I've encountered this scenario in previous jobs wherein the printer VLAN had to be separated from the VLAN focusing on thin clients versus the VLAN that covered desktop computers using IP phones to connect to the rest of the network. On network 2 we're going to set up 3 separate VLANs. We're going to distinguish these VLANs at the third octet and they will all be /28s, meaning that they can provide network connectivity for up to 14 separate hosts. We'll start by configuring our IP addresses on our 3 computers here, which simulate our 3 separated VLANs. Our IP addresses have been configured. With our IP addresses configured, we now need to set up our switch to recognize that we want 3 separate VLANs on our network. To do this, we will console in to our switch from our admin PC, like so. Alright, and let us begin. We'll access our configuration terminal, and we will begin programming in our VLANs. Here are our 3 VLANs. To take things one step further, we can establish VLAN interfaces on our switches per our individual VLANs. We will do this now. Third time's a charm. And we can check to see our progress so far. And here we have our 3 VLAN interfaces. And we want to do this because we do not want to use the native VLAN of VLAN 1. That's deemed a security risk. Our 3 VLANs are intact. There's our black hole VLAN for the ports that we don't need. We'll move forward from here. With our 3 VLANs configured, we now need to assign individual ports on the switch to our 3 VLANs. We will do this by accessing each of these ports that our 3 computers are plugged into. We'll also access the port that is established between our switch and our router. We are going to turn this port into a trunk port to allow multiple VLANs to communicate across one single port and access the router. So, to start, we will begin with the port for our admin PC. That port, I believe, is port 24. We'll find this out. That port is up. These two are assigned to our EC2A, PC2B computers. We want to see our descriptions just to be sure. Here we have it. Personally, this is why I established descriptions on all of the ports that I am using. So we will access our admin port first. That port is up. We'll access our number 1 port. Alright, all 3 of our ports are now set on each individual VLAN. We can double check this with the show VLAN command, which will give us some details to which ports are assigned to what VLAN. With our ports assigned and our VLANs established, we now need to set up the default gateway of our native VLAN in order to facilitate traffic. So for the purposes of this exercise, we'll make our native VLAN VLAN number 10. We will use the default gateway of VLAN 10 in order to facilitate our connections. There we have it. This will come into play later. And to check on our progress, there's our default gateway. Now we'll set up our trunk port. Our trunk port is going to be Gigabit Interface 01. And this switch port command is very similar to configuring port security and to establish VLANs, but in this case it's going to be switch port mode trunk, like so. Furthermore, switch port trunk native VLAN 10 now establishes our native VLAN as VLAN 10, which will also come into play with our default gateway. To take things one step further, I'd like to designate which VLANs are allowed to communicate across our trunk port. You could do all, but that may pose a security risk, so we'll designate which VLAN IDs are permitted to communicate. It will be 10, 20, and 30. We'll inspect our progress now. And we will save our progress. With our switch configured, We'll now focus on configuring our router. And configuring our router for multiple VLANs is a little different than configuring a router for a single VLAN environment, in that we have to install sub-interfaces. These sub-interfaces will help us designate traffic between each of our VLANs, and they will also help us encapsulate our traffic between multiple VLANs. The sub-interfaces must be tagged with the same ID as our individual VLAN, 10 for 10, 20 for 20, 30 for 30. We'll also indicate which of our VLANs is our native VLAN. And we will establish our IP addresses. We'll access our gigabit interface on our router, apply no shutdown. That will bring all of our sub-interfaces online. We'll check our progress. We'll speed up our timetable. And now we'll check to see if we can communicate with each of our VLANs. There's VLAN 10, VLAN 20, and VLAN 30. Let's check to see if we can communicate with our VLAN interfaces on our switch. VLAN 10, VLAN 20, and VLAN 30. And there we have it. We have now established a network with 3 separate VLANs. Now, here's a challenge for you. Let us say that in our office, with our 3 separate VLANs, we want to install a printer VLAN. We want to install a printer that's easily accessible by these 3 computers, but all of the unused ports on our switch are closed. And there are only 3 VLANs configured between our switch and our router. Well, let's open up one of the ports on our switch. Let's get a new sub-interface, and let's move forward from there. So let's see. Let's establish our printer on port 23. Let's get our switch ready. We'll do VLAN 100. Because we have attempted to assign VLAN 100 to this interface, even though the VLAN does not exist, it will be created automatically. I'm going to open up our port. Just turn off port security for the moment and turn it back on. So the port 23 is ready. VLAN interface VLAN 100 is now active. Just for simplicity's sake, let's check our progress so far. Let's get our router ready. And our router is all set. It occurs to me, however, that I forgot to permit traffic from VLAN 100 on our trunk port. Let's get that fixed. Ah, it overrode it. So you'll need to be specific. There we have it. Now, let's install our printer. Good enough. Now let's see if we can communicate with our printer. Outstanding. Let's see if the rest of our VLANs can communicate with our printer. All right. There we have it. Our new printer has been set up. Network 2 is working with 4 VLANs. And I will see you next time.